Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker-Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process and for authors to learn valuable tips on producing and marketing your audiobooks. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Today we're going to talk about the ultimate audiobook launch strategy for indie authors. And it's a big topic, so this will be the first in a series of podcast episodes. I'm glad you're with me. I'm Becky Parker-Geist, the host of Audiobook Connection, and I'm also president of Bay Area Independent Publishers Association. And I did a 2-hour workshop on this very topic just yesterday. So this is why I know it's going to stretch into a series, but let's go ahead and get started. The starting place always in, I think, everything that we're doing, but let's especially focus in on our publishing work, the question of our why. The why behind our audiobook or publishing work is so critical, both to keeping us focused on moving forward and staying inspired and connected to our mission. It's so important. The road of indie publishing it's a rocky road. You know, sometimes has the sweetness of that flavor of ice cream, and sometimes it feels like this pothole-ridden backcountry road that we're bouncing along, trying to avoid potholes wherever possible. But it can be a very rewarding, even so. And so we start with our why. We start with what is the impact we're trying to have in the world? What is the change or are the changes that we are trying to instigate in the world? Most of us are writing because we either have a desire to entertain and or a desire to make this world a better place, to make life a better experience for those who read and listen to our books. And you might also ask, why now? What is the particular mission that you're on, and how does it connect to this moment in time? And then when we combine that with the experience that we want our listeners to have, we start to kind of juice ourselves up with what it takes to stay focused on our mission and to move forward. So I know that I talk about this many times when we're starting off on something, is understand what your goals are, where you're headed, and your why. So just again, here, as we're considering the launch of our audiobook, we want to stay true to that mission. Now, the next thing is, as you're thinking about your audiobook launch, it's ideal to position it really as an event. So it's not just a release of your audiobook, but it really is an event. And you can actually build events as a part of the launch experience. Most of us, I think, are very familiar with an in-person book launch or an online book launch. These are events. And so incorporating that thinking into the launch approach is really valuable. And just as we have before holidays, for example, Christmas or Valentine's Day or a birthday, a big part of the excitement is about building that anticipation. So I want you to think about what you can do to build anticipation as you are approaching your launch. Now, if this is your very first book, you would be approaching it, with a different kind of energy, I suppose, or perhaps the better way to say is you don't already have those existing readers and listeners and following. Now, you may have a following from other work that you're doing or just who you're being in the world and how you're putting yourself out there as a leader, as someone who is inspiring others. So as you are approaching the launch moment, then we want to think about, what can we do to build that anticipation? How will you express to those people in your circle, whether that's 5 people or whether that's 500,000 people? How are we going to express our excitement and enthusiasm that will generate their excitement and enthusiasm as we build up towards our launch? So you really want to treat the launch like a celebration and a community gathering, because that is what it is. And as you're looking at your plan, so your launch date, it's good to have a launch date. And I will go a little deeper into that launch date in a moment. But as we're thinking about the launch date, then you want to build a timeline with sort of these countdown moments, these milestones that you're going to, or triggers that you're going to hit along the way, so that you're building that anticipation. Now, I want to just take a short side note about timelines. When you are launching your audiobook, keep in mind that unlike the other formats, on most platforms, we'll put it that way, on the standard retail platforms, you're not going to have control over when it actually launches. You will submit it for distribution, but you won't have any control how long it takes to get through their QC process on any given platform. And so you don't have complete control there. However, if you're on AMPlify Audiobooks, you have a lot more control. The reason is that the QC timeline is much shorter. Okay? So, and in fact, if you plan your approach in appropriate ways, then you can actually control that timeline. When I say appropriate ways, I mean have your audiobook complete and your files ready and approved, and then you can schedule on a specific date. So this is one of the many ways that AMPlify Audiobooks keeps you in control of your overall marketing. All right. So now you've got your date, you've got your timeline, building up towards that moment, building anticipation with your following, whatever size that following is. When you do launch, you can launch in many different ways. And a lot of people ask about, well, should I launch at the same time as print and ebook editions? Do I do it as a single thing, or do I spread them out? What's the best approach? I'm going to tell you the approach that I took with my last book and what I believe is the very best approach. And I'll tell you why. Okay? So first of all, with your audiobook, I recommend that this is assuming you haven't launched any formats as yet. In this case, I suggest that you launch first with your audiobook on AMPlify Audiobooks. The reason is because, first of all, your audiobook is going to provide you the highest revenue on AMPlify compared to all the other platforms, and also compared to your print and ebook editions. So you're going to get the highest revenue per audiobook that you sell. Now, there are some ways in which that could not be true. If you decide to price your audiobook way, way low and price your ebook higher and you have a good ebook following, but I'm talking pretty generally across the board, your expenses for a digital download are zero. And your revenue from each sale on AMPlify Audiobooks is 65% of whatever you choose to sell it for. By starting on AMPlify Audiobooks, you also are going to generate, for those people who are just eager for your audiobook or for your book to launch, they're the ones who are going to be those first adopters for your content. So you want them to buy in at the place where it's going to create the most benefit for you and the maximum impact. Okay, so that's why I suggest you launch on AMPlify Audiobooks first. Then, and you decide what that time frame is going to be. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 6 months, maybe you decide after you see a drop off in or saturation of your existing followers. But later, then, you can launch it more broadly to the other platforms, knowing that you're not going to earn as much revenue per sale, but you will then be out in the world in places that, where people are looking for audiobooks. Not everyone, sadly, has discovered AMPlify Audiobooks yet. We're working on it. So what I say is launch on AMPlify Audiobooks first, then after some period of time, launch broadly. Now, when you launch broadly, that gives you another opportunity. When you see that it's live on other platforms, you can then share that news with your followers. Now it's available on audiobooks.com, for example. You see, now it's genuine news that you're sharing, and you're sharing your excitement about that as well. Remind people, even in those moments, in those communications, that you prefer that they buy it on AMPlify because that helps you the most. Okay. When it comes to your print and ebook editions, I'll tell you what I did. I launched AMPlify first. Then about a month later, I launched the ebook. And then about a month later, I launched the print book. And then about a month later, I launched broadly on other audiobook platforms. So that gave me a chance to really direct my audience from where I was going to generate the highest revenue per sale, and then gradually worked my way down to where I would be earning the least per sale. So that's what I recommend. And then what you want to do once you have launched on AMPlify Audiobooks is you're wanting to concentrate those sales and that listener engagement in that one place. Here's the thing. Let me give you an example. If you launch, let's say, go first to Audible because you have that idea, and I will challenge that idea. This idea that I'm about to state, I will challenge it. But the idea that everybody listens to audiobooks on Audible, that is simply not true. If it were true, there would not be over 60 audiobook retailers. They wouldn't exist. So there are people who are looking for their audiobooks on other platforms, and they have a whole host of different reasons for doing so. Your job, though, is to direct that traffic and direct your followers. They are followers, after all. You are the leader. Act as the leader, direct them where you want them to go. And when they're on AMPlify, when they get their audiobooks on AMPlify, one of the really cool things is that you will actually know who they are. That's not something that you're going to get from sales on any other platform. You will have your listener names and emails so that you can reach out to them because they're your customers. And I think most audiobook customers expect, because they have to put in their email address when they sign up for Audible, for example, they might think that you as the author get that information so that you can be in touch with them as well, and they just don't know. The thing is, and we always want to treat our listeners, our followers, the very best that we can with honor and respect. No spamming, no pushing those boundaries in any negative kind of way. We want to always provide a really positive experience for them, and that includes that respect of their email address. But when your listeners are on AMPlify, they can communicate directly with you through the platform about your audiobook. They can post reflections, which are kind of like notes in the margin of a print book. You might do that yourself. I certainly have had books where I'm, writing in the margins because I want to remember something or highlight something. We've built that right into the AMPlify Audiobooks platform. So your listeners of the audiobooks can make their own notes in the margins. So again, having that level of experience, that positive experience, that connected experience between listener and author is very powerful. If you just send them off to Audible, they will not have that experience. You will not have a great experience because you're going to get so little of that royalty, of the amount that your listener has spent. You're going to get such a small percentage, and you won't know who they are. So why take that approach? Why send people there, even if you think that that's the only place people buy audiobooks, which, of course, it's not. So let's save you from that. I'm trying to help you avoid that pit and that hole that you can fall into there with an inaccurate assumption that everyone's going to go over there. We're empowering you at AMPlify Audiobooks. So coming back to our launch plan, we want to use that focused launch window to really boost visibility and to get the rankings or really to start to build reviews. You're going to know who your listeners are, so you can actually ask them for reviews, right? And you can build these conversations right within your audiobook page. You can build these conversations with people who are listening. And if reflections or these sort of margin notes, if they're posted publicly so that you can see them, you can then also share those as a part of your marketing. And now, so I'm going to step back a little bit from that aspect, and let's talk about something else that you can do as a part of your launch on AMPlify Audiobooks. If you're not on AMPlify and you choose not to take that path, you can do a similar kind of event. You're just on your own, and you'll have to market only to your own following. But you can host an audiobook launch event through AMPlify. Here's the big benefit of that. It is using Zoom technology, so it's not that aspect of it particularly. But what it does do is on AMPlify, anytime someone is hosting an event, that event will show up as a community event. So everyone who comes to the platform looking for audiobooks is going to see the events that are coming up, and these are audiobook listeners. They're people who are looking for these kinds of experiences. And so the registrations for your event go up as a result. You are expanding your audience through the platform by hosting an event. It could be a Q&A. You could include readings if you want. If you had a narrator, you could invite your narrator to participate in that event, and I highly recommend that. If you have more than one narrator, ask them all to participate in helping spread the word about the event and to join in if they're able. You might share some behind-the-scenes stories. That can be fun. You could include any listener interaction and get feedback from your audience who may have already listened to the audiobook or parts of it. Find out what questions they have and address those. You can also, and this is cool, you could offer exclusive bonuses or benefits for people who attend. As an example, you could offer, say that you have a special gift for anyone who attends, and then at the end of the event, you offer that gift. It could be, if you have attendees who have not yet listened to your audiobook, it could be a discount code for your audiobook. You might also, as a part of leading up to this event, put your book on a promotional sale before the event, and then at the event, to try to encourage more people to buy in advance. And then at the event, offer a coupon code after that sale is over, right? So that's a way that you could offer a free gift. Now, you might have a different bonus or gift for people who have already purchased your audiobook. And that might be some behind the scenes content, might be a chapter you had to cut out because it just wasn't, your editor said, nope, that has to go, and you trusted your editor. And so it can be that kind of material. Anything, maybe a character's backstory that's really interesting to you, but you've only shared little pieces of it in the development of the character throughout your book or your series. It might be advance notice about a book that you're working on. Maybe it's the next in the series. So there's a lot of really fun things that are very attractive to listeners that you can offer at this audiobook launch event. And make sure that you record the event, because that recording is then creating content that you can use for promotional content, like for if you're going to do another event, or just to share the event and what happened at the event. And you're just building your audience through this invitation into the experience. Okay, we're going to pause there for just a moment, and we're going to come right back. Okay, real talk. What if your audiobook platform actually helped you sell your audiobook? Actually helped you. Like email templates and tools, promo campaigns, discount codes, listener insights, ways to connect with other authors for cross promotions, and to connect with listeners, where you can host events or even run an audiobook club with a built-in community that's excited to discover new voices. That's AMPlify Audiobooks. You see, it's not just a place to list your audiobook in hopes of a transaction. No, it's a place to market it, to grow your audience, and actually connect with listeners who care. You can run promotions, engage your fans, and be part of a creative community that's all about lifting up indie authors and small publishers, not burying them in an algorithm somewhere. Oh, and yeah, you'll also earn 2 to 4 times more royalties than the usual platforms. How about that? So if you're ready to stop whispering into the void and start building real momentum, head over to AMPlifyAudiobooks.com. AMPlify Audiobooks, where your stories don't just live, they thrive. All right, coming back to the audiobook launch, we're going to cover just a couple other little things, and then we're going to stop for today. I know I've already covered a lot, but I want to give you just a little bit more in this episode. So, another thing that you can do, and you can do this outside the AMPlify Audiobooks platform to some degree, but it's more challenging, and that is to invite your narrator into the conversation. The reason I say it's a little harder if you're not on AMPlify is because you have to create a conversation that is away from the audiobook. So probably on some social media platform where you're trying to engage in conversation there, and it's not really very focused in terms of your audience and who will see that. So you can do it, but really, if you're on AMPlify, then you're going to have the benefit of that conversation happening right there on the platform. Invite your narrator into that conversation. And a really cool, fun thing to do at the outset is, as soon as you're on the platform and your narrator or narrators are on the platform, start seeding the conversation. You can ask the narrator questions. They could ask you questions. You can share thoughts about their narration. They can share thoughts about your writing. This kind of conversation is very enticing. It draws people in. And then you can use that conversation. It could be like a screenshot of part of that conversation that you can then use in other places where people are not yet already in the conversation, where they're on social media or in your email list. You can invite them and entice them with a segment of this public conversation. You could discuss things like character choices, emotional moments, recording challenges, sort of that behind the scenes. And that might apply if you don't have a narrator, but you recorded it yourself. That could be a great conversation to be, well, it's not a conversation if you're sharing it with yourself, obviously, but it could be something that you share as a reflection within the platform, within your audiobook specifically, okay? You could share reflections about the process for you of bringing the story to life in audio with your narrator. You could let listeners, you see, what you're doing is you're letting them in on the conversation by posting chunks of it out publicly in other places. And it's like it's almost like you're letting them eavesdrop in a fun way. It can also demonstrate that chemistry that you have between author and narrator. This is not something that the general public usually gets any experience of. And people love behind-the-scenes content. You might talk about favorite scenes or things that were unexpected discoveries during production. There is so much more that we're going to cover. But I'm going to stop for today because I don't want to overload you with information. We will come back to continue this ultimate audiobook launch for indie authors, an upcoming episode. If you go ahead and get started with just the parts we've already talked about, you're going to be off to a great start. I encourage you, whether you are a listener, whether you are just planning to launch an audiobook, or whether you're a narrator, whatever part of the audiobook world, wherever you fit in the world, and maybe it's multiple places. I'm in so many different parts of that world. I love listening to audiobooks. I love narrating audiobooks. I am an author. All of these things come into play for me. I invite you today to go to AMPlifyAudiobooks.com. Start free. That's the way everybody starts. Just get your free account and take a look around. Start discovering the things that are available to you there. And start joining in the conversation as soon as possible. Thanks for joining me today. We'll come back with part 2 later. All right. I look forward to seeing you on AMPlify Audiobooks. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.